Good morning. It's Monday morning for me. It's Tuesday, who knows when for you. I hope you all had a great weekend. Like I said, it's Monday for me, so I'm still thinking weekend. Even if we were not doing virtual, all of the quizzes for the next two chapters would be open book. You would end up with a simple solutions quiz and a history quiz on the same day. That's still going to be the case. History of the world, that's just too big. You can't cover it all in 1 year. These are the two chapters that we get cut. I will point out the stuff that you need to read in depth because it's not covered anywhere else. The rest of it will be find the information for the quiz, because it's stuff that either it's good to review, but we're not going to spend any time on in depth because I feel like you've already covered it either in my class or in another class, or it's something that you just need to be introduced to the people's names, but not necessarily have it like ingrained in your mind forever. So, chapter 20. You do need to read all of page 288, 289. That's kind of the introduction of the chapter. Those are 2 pages that you do need to read in depth. The rest of the chapter till you get to the very end is going to be skimming. Modern age. Remember, you have your 3 time periods when it comes to history. You have I think it's called ancient history, which is before 500. You have the Middle Ages, which is 500 to 1500. Then everything after 1500 AD is considered modern times. So the modern age, the age we're in now, is the age of science. Man has lived on the earth for several thousand years, but only in the modern age, the past 500 years, has he begun to earnestly fulfill God's command to subdue the earth and exercise dominion over every living thing that moves upon the earth. Modern science since 1500, has changed the world by changing the way people think about the world. A study of world history would not be complete without a study of the rise of modern science. I always think of technology as a snowball. It starts small, but it just quickly gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You have the invention of the phone, and think about how fast we went from Alexander Graham Bell's phone to now the thing I'm taking my video on, making a video on. And just in my lifetime, I've seen just the technology that you can do on a phone, just the way it's grown is unreal. We go from a typewriter to a computer, and then, now basically we have computers on our phones, just like a snowball, the way it just keeps growing. Why ancient science failed, no foundation. From the dawn of history, men have looked at the stars in wonder. And then that whole section goes on and talks about superstitions, and how that kind of held people back scientifically. Then talks about no general principles. Main thing there I want you to get straight is, it helps if I remember when I need to have a piece of paper handy, is these 2 words, astrology and astronomy. Astrology is, the way they define it here is, basically astrology is looking to the stars for your destiny and all that kind of stuff. This one is the one that the Bible, it says, is a big no. We should be looking to God, not to the stars. We should be looking to the Creator, not the creation. Astronomy is the study of the stars. This is like the scientific study. This is like what you would do in Mr. B's class. This is what God wants us to do. He wants us to study it, and to understand seasons and days and times, the stuff he put in place. He wants us to look at the stars and see that there is no way that the stars could have gotten where the stars are if it wasn't for God putting them out there. The placement of the stars proves the creation, the biblical account of creation. Which I know you've talked about with Mr. B, and he can explain that in more depth than I can. Point being is you need to know the difference between those 2 words. Astrology is like horoscopes and all that hocus pocus stuff that the Bible teaches against. Astronomy is the study of the stars. And that's a good thing. Goes on to talk about while medieval science failed, going back to the Age of Darkness, which we already know that's part of the Dark Ages / Middle Ages. Scholastic Thomas Aquinas was perhaps the most successful at combining Aristotle's ideas with Roman Catholic teachings. And so you've got there Aristotle and Aquinas that you'll need to read about. Then we get to page 290. Francis Bacon's probably not talked about as much, so probably just need to go ahead and read all of The Rise of Modern Science. But then after that, you get to Copernicus, who I'm sure you've heard about before. If not, read over it. Johann Kepler, Galileo, all these scientific dudes with planetary motion type stuff. Newton, I know you've heard of Newton. I know you've learned Newton's. Well, if you were here in 6th grade, I know you talked about Newton and learned about Newton's laws of motion with Mr. B. So don't need to necessarily go in depth there with that dude. Then it goes on to Albert Einstein, who I know everybody's heard about. Then goes on and talks about how scientific improvements have helped us to be able to farm better, come up with better food. Medicine, progress in medicine since 1500 has been astounding. Andreas Vesuvulus, known as the father of anatomy, pioneered the scientific study of the human body in the 1540s when he published the first complete description of the human body. In 1616, William Harvey described the circulation of the blood in the human body. Now, that's one that I didn't know until I read this book. William Harvey, the dude that came up with knowing how the blood circulates through the body. Then modern inventions. So that's 20.1 in a nutshell. Like I said, a lot of that you know, so some of it you might not, but still, glance, skim over it, read it as thoroughly as you think you need to. And then you'll have an open book quiz over it. 20.2 is Darwinism. I know Mr. B has covered him thoroughly, so we really don't need to go into a whole lot on him. So basically we would kind of go Darwin. Talk to Mr. B if you have any questions. Then 20.3 is the rise of the industry. Well, we talked about the Industrial Revolution when we read the Rags and Riches book and the A Christmas Carol, as far as negative stuff that went with it, child labor laws, all that stuff. Talked about Wesleyan Revival. We've talked about it before. I would read the improvements in agriculture about subsistence farming, which is basically farming just enough. And once again, there's a bunch of superstitions in there. But then you get into page 302, Protestant work ethic, biblical teaching that God expects all men to work and that all work is noble. Then you have McCormick, who I know you have probably learned about before. I know if you've had me, you've learned about him before. John Deere, same thing we've talked about before. Before that, skipping to page 303, the Industrial Revolution, England takes the lead. Before the age of industry, manufacturing was carried out under a process known as the domestic system. Domestic means house. So basically that means that things are done in the house, or in small private shops, not on a big scale, with the factory system. Spread of industrialism. The industrial advancement began in England and soon spread to America. By the mid-19th century, both nations abounded in railroads and factories. Western Europe experienced industrial growth to a lesser extent than England or America for two important reasons. Some European countries had experienced a degree of revival during the Pietist movement of the late 17th century, but the English Wesleyan revival and the American Great Awakening had far more reaching effects. And in England and America, where spiritual fires and political freedom prevailed, industrial growth was spontaneous. In most other countries, monarchical governments under monarchies, I can't pronounce that word, undertook various projects to promote industry for national advancement. So basically, England and America took over in the Industrial Revolution, and that tells you why. Growth of cities, of course, as transportation and factories improve, the cities are going to grow bigger. Blessings and curses, which is basically a lot of what we've already talked about in Rags and Riches and A Christmas Carol. Better living conditions, of course, things eventually get better. All right, so that's 20.3 in a nutshell. So on today, Tuesday, you'll have open book quiz over 20.1. Wednesday, you'll have an open book quiz over 20.2, 20.3. I'm trying to think. And have your open book simple solutions quiz. I'll put that on Wednesday as well. On Thursday, when I'm still keeping my fingers crossed that you'll be back, you'll have an open book quiz over 20.4. If you want, you can go glance at 20.4. 20.4, you really should already know. We're talking, you might know John Kay, who invented the flying shuttle, or James Hargreaves, who came up with the spinning jenny. But the rest of these, I would think you would pretty much know. From Eli Whitney with the cotton gin to Carnegie with steel, Rockefeller with oil. But that will be when hopefully we're back, like I said. So that's Tuesday, Wednesday in a nutshell. See you hopefully on Thursday or Friday.